Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Serious explorers of old buildings. What's the weirdest or creepiest thing that you've found so far? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy. This wasn't really exploring as such, but back in the late 80s when Germany was still a divided country, I went to Berlin. When Berlin got divided, part of the West Berlin subway ended up under East Berlin territory. There were only 2 lines and a handful of stations affected, but when you took the subway on those 2 lines, you went via a few East Berlin stations before ending up back in West Berlin. The stations in the East weren't operating. They had just been boarded up to stop people from using them as an escape to the West. The trains didn't stop there. They just slowed down. There was barely any lighting in the stations. Most of it really was just lit up from the train. Those stations basically had been abandoned, so the architecture and everything was unchanged from World War II times. It looked really eerie and creepy, like stepping back in time. My aunt lives in an open field with a very large wooded area. I was exploring with my cousin, and we found an old rotten Barney doll. When we pushed on the doll to make it talk, its voice box was broken, making a muffled scream. It was very terrifying. Technically not creepy, but another group of explorers. Me and my cousin went to check out a former US Army base in my hometown. First, we saw a couple making out, having sex, not sure which one really, and tried to politely notify them that they weren't alone, to which they didn't respond. Later, when it got darker though, we kept hearing footsteps that stopped whenever we stopped to listen for them. When we started walking faster, they did too. So we went full sprint and somehow ended up on the roof of that complex. When we looked into the courtyard area, we saw a group of younger kids emerge from a building and realized we were just scaring ourselves really. We had a nice chat, both parties trying to act as if they weren't scared shitless just a few minutes ago, and we showed them how to get onto the roof. Oh, also, there was a Burger King there, and the kitchen was basically still fully intact, just no power. There were still burgers on the grill, and they didn't really look much different from how they look when you eat them. I didn't eat a BK for a while after that. And rest assured that if another 15 years go by and you return to that place, those burgers will probably still look the same. Bon appetit. I'm not a professional urban explorer, God I wish, but something happened to me when I was exploring a house at the age of 11. So there's this old house in the middle of a field near a nice town. My best friend at the time said that she had seen weird things happen in there, and she made it sound as if it was a ghost. I was pretty surprised. She had never had interest in creepy stuff, and now she was encouraging me to go with her so we could explore the house. I agreed, not because I wanted to go. It was kind of hard to get there, and I was feeling pretty lazy, but because I didn't want a 9 to 10-year-old girl to go by herself to an abandoned house. I grabbed the light and headed to the house with her. There was tall grass, rocks, and trash on our way there. I was getting nervous because if we had to run away, it'd be impossible for us to get out faster than a grown person. We finally get to the house and walk in. We find nothing but trash and dusty furniture until my friend walks into a seemingly locked room and starts crying and screaming. I bolt down the hallway to her and find 3 to 5 dead dogs, like large to medium-sized dogs. Needless to say, I was so scared and shocked I peed myself. We ran away crying hard as F. And that's why, kids, you always keep an eye on your children so they don't do stupid crap like we did. Saw somebody had writ their name, I assume, in poop in a ruined bakery once. When me and my father did some building work on an old barn that's attached to his house, we found a glass bottle, heel of a shoe, and a dead bird skeleton in the wall. Apparently, this is to keep witches away. There are historic tales of witches in the area. We still have the bird skeleton. My friends and I went into an abandoned house once. It was like the whole family had just got up and left one day. There was a creepy family portrait that looked straight out of the 80s, but I'm pretty sure it was the family that had lived there. The kids' toys were scattered everywhere, and there were literally thousands of check stubs. They were everywhere. We thought they were actual checks and took a bunch. We thought we were rich. I have no idea why, since actual checks would have been worthless too. I was exploring an abandoned school with my friends, and in one of the science rooms we found a box of mummified pig fetuses just sitting in the middle of the room. I'm guessing they were going to be dissected before the school closed, and they didn't decompose because of all the chemicals in them. The creepiest thing is, when we went back 2 years later, the box was gone. I was exploring this area with a few old dilapidated houses. Inside one of them I found probably around 5,000 to 10,000 old political signs from my city. I mean, this house was absolutely overflowing with them. I looked up some info on the name that was on the signs and found out that one of the people running had accused the other candidate of having someone pull up all her signs, but they never had any proof. I looked up who owned the land that the house was on, and it was the other candidate's brother. Basically, I solved a nearly 2-decade-old case of election fraud, or whatever it was. It was a huge deal in the news back then, and couldn't tell anyone because I was a shithead kid that was trespassing. I was exploring an old vinyl factory, as I'm a huge fan of vinyl, was hoping to score some free vinyl laying about somewhere. The place was a very tall white building, run down now as it had been shut down for years. Still had the large presses there that thought was cool, but no molds, so that was sad. Walked into a room where the roof had given in, and I looked up to see the rafters full of birds. That's not what was creepy. I took a few steps into the room to hear a loud crunch. I looked down to realize the floor was layered with dead birds and their poop. Like, must have been 100 plus dead birds and their poop, just layer after layer. Nowhere else in the whole building but this room. Noped out of there. I'm assuming in this post you meant vinyl, so I hope I got that right. But yeah, exposed roof, birds, bird poop. Makes sense. My cousin was an Air Force brat, born and raised all over the world. He was in high school in Okinawa, Japan. The military every year would come in with a demo of live ordnance that was all over the island. There was also warnings about going into caves. He and his buddies found a cave. Inside was a Japanese rifle and the dismantled skeleton of a soldier who apparently blew himself up with a grenade. They discreetly reported it to the Japanese military, took over from there. I was walking through an abandoned military fort that's kinda near where I live. My 2 friends were with me, but they're both really short, so they made me walk in front of them when we decided to explore the old tunnels. We were walking into them, and I get about 3 steps from the first corner when I hear movement that couldn't have been an animal. It sounded like a person standing up or walking or something. I turned around and just walked out, so my friends followed me. Me and my friend went into an old abandoned mansion. We were walking around for a while, then when we got upstairs we found a room with a bunch of sleeping bags, dirty needles, and used condoms. Then, in a different section of the house, we found a room with a mattress, blanket, pillows, and 3 bottles of Hennessy. In the garage, we found an old jukebox with all the music ripped out, and finally the strangest thing was an old microwave with a jacket on top of it covered in brown stains just sitting in the middle of the hallway. I live in a small town called Deming, New Mexico. It's basically a border town since we're only about 100 miles away from the border. Anyway, there was an old mine back when they found a very large area of gold. In 1967, David Guerrero, a Mexican cartel, entered the mine and killed 20 people in hopes for the gold to himself. He died of a heat stroke 1 day later. 37 years later, 2 men were hiking in the Florida mountains and stumbled across an abandoned mine. They went in there and found everybody's bones that went missing. In 2017, me and my friend Nathan were hiking and he remembered about the mine. We decided to check it out since we had nothing else better to do and to see if we can find those guys' bones at least. I, being the Mexican, I was carrying a .22 rifle. I was afraid of zombies and stuff at the time, and cartels run that area we were in, so I had to stay strapped. We went to the mine, and before we even entered, my friend noticed an abandoned and totaled 1989 Chevy truck. We went to investigate, and sure enough, there they were. I guess that truck was so wrecked the police or detectives couldn't notice it. We called police, and turns out it was those 2 men that went missing. They were identified because both of them broke an arm a week prior to that accident from a football accident. So they got old x-rays and compared them, and yep, it was them. There's a ridge, and on either side are valleys. The ridge and the valley are in the Australian bush, which is very thick, and the best way to enter either valley is after a good fire has been through, like the fire that cleared everything away in 2002. In each valley, which is either side of the ridge, is a cave, 2 caves. The first cave, the most accessible of the 2, is open, wide, and has a red earth beneath its hanging rock. The eaves are of a bright sandstone. Great cave, a great place to camp. Now, on the other side of the ridge, in the other valley, is the other cave. Now, the other cave is a little different. They're both similar, but feel different. The other cave is harder to reach, and is of a darker stone. People have been there before with candles. This cave is hidden by trees, but it's large inside with drawings on the sandstone walls. It's a dark cave, not just because it is hidden behind dark trees or because it always feels damp. The cave just feels wrong. And then, of course, the drawings. They look to be made from sand mixed with water. Some show people. One shows what looks like 3 figures pointing up at something. But the spookiest image on the wall is of a face, a bird-like face, which sits above a smaller cave entrance, leasing under the cave wall to who knows where. Because I'm in no damned hurry to go crawling on my hands and knees around under a cave wall and into the pitch black. Then there was that powerful owl I saw down there eating a possum, a rare bird that won big too. A bloody great big owl was watching me when I was down there once. The fact you might fall and break a leg getting in and out of the valley adds to the grimness of entering down there, but it just feels wrong, and if you go wandering off the track, you'll find that there are some places still untamed that just don't feel right. There are plenty of untamed places where you can feel very at peace, but that cave is not one of them. Have you guys done any cave spelunking or exploring? Where I live, there aren't really any caves, so I would love to go check some out. In the 80s, in southeast Texas, my brother and I were walking down a creek and fishing when we saw an old abandoned house in the woods. Since we weren't catching anything worth keeping, we decided to explore it. Half the doors were locked, but we ended up through the living room area when we saw a mattress and stuff was piled up on it in front of the stairs. We decided to climb it and go upstairs. As I walked up the stairs, I turned to make sure my brother made it over, and when I turned back around, I almost went face first into a skeleton of a large bird hanging by a string in the stairway. It startled me, but mostly I thought it was odd. When I reached the top of the stairs, I looked around the large, dark, empty room only to realize it wasn't empty. The floor was completely covered with small bones. We heard something downstairs, so we went to the only window of the room and looked down into the garage roof. We didn't want to go back the way we came, so we just jumped out the window, grabbed our rods and reels, and ran off. To this day, my brother swears he looked back and saw an old woman in that window watching us run away. Me and my girlfriend have a habit of going around to really old abandoned houses to explore. I have a bag dedicated for this, with respirator masks, flashlights, first aid kits, etc. I have 2 stories, one weird and one scary. 1. We pull up to this really old looking place in the middle of nowhere. Door is unlocked, but something is blocking it. So we go around to the back and I kick the door in. First thing I do is go move the dresser in front of the front door so we can get out easier. Then take stock of the place. It's a trashed out mess. Animal droppings cover about 40% of the floor, and about 20% of what's left of the floor has caved into the basement. So we start to look around, and at this point, we put the masks on because the air is foul and dusty. We walk into what used to be a living room, and we both begin to laugh for a long-ass time, because in the living room, smack dab in the middle, is a toilet with a fake flower next to it sticking out of an old coffee tin, and it's facing an old dinosaur of a TV sitting on top of a 5-gallon bucket. It was such a weirdly peaceful setup. TV didn't work or anything, but it was the quaint little scene, and it was funny as F. 2. This is the scary one. Different day, different house. Pull up and there's a small gate, but we don't even hop it, because just the look of this place is freaky AF. I don't normally freak out if something looks scary, but this is different. The front yard was full of garbage, stacked about 5 feet high. The house was this disgusting old orange color, but just looked freaky as F. I can't really describe it, but I promise you, just the sight of the house had me sweating. And I've seen and been in some scary-ass houses. I take out my little mini $10 drone with a GoPro duct taped to it, fly it around a bit around the house and bring it back, return to the laptop in my car, and watch the footage. House is freaky, but then I realized the garbage and old furniture in the front yard is arranged into a giant cross, which was so large you could only see from above. We noped the F out of there real quick, as the feeling of being watched was eating away at our nerves. We got back in the car and deleted every picture we took and the GoPro video, and haven't even gone within 10 miles of it since. The first old building my best friend and I explored was really a shed left behind after a hurricane ruined her grandparents' neighbor's house. The neighbors didn't bother taking what was left in the shed with them, even though they did come back to the area sometimes. Keep in mind, this is a secluded part of an already very small, desolate town. No one lives here, and even if they did at one point, there's no reason to return. So we enter the shed from a door, and immediately there is mold, dirt, and insects all over the floor. Right in front of the door is one of those white fold-up tables with metal legs. You know the kind. Directly left of the door is a kitchenette that looks like it's been caught on fire and left there charred, with the ground in front of it charred, and a fold-up chair on the opposite wall with trash littered about the place everywhere. I mean, everywhere. Random teenagers have obviously used this place as their trash can, because there are trash bags, beer bottles, beer cans, cardboard boxes, red Solo cups, styrofoam, plastic wrappings, and just about any kind of garbage you can imagine. Trash is also leading up to the door too. Above the fold-up table is an entire wall covered with corkboard and slightly burnt and very dusty Polaroids. It is very dark in this shed because there's no lighting system whatsoever and no windows. So we just shine our flashlights on the Polaroids because that's all that's interesting anyway. We then notice all of the canned beer littering the floor and what was either a raccoon or a possum that scurried out and opening across from the kitchenette. After the mini heart attack from the vermin, we turn back to the Polaroids. I'm talking like over 100 on the wall. This place is tiny, so it's impressive they have so many. Even if the shack is now overrun with Bud Light cans, trash, and red Solo cups that not even the squirrels would try to stick their heads in, it did seem to be livable hangout for someone at some point. We take our flashlights over the photos. Not all of them are Polaroids. Some are just from cameras that were taken at Walgreens or someplace to get its photos developed before Steve Jobs came and ruined the digital camera industry. My best friend and I know we don't have much time to be in the shed because our grandparents are good Christian, Catholic, and senile, so if they knew we were snooping in Billy Joe's old shed, our asses would be toast. So we grab just a couple of the photos that immediately catch our eye from the cork wall and take them with us as mementos, as we do for all the houses we snoop. When we get back to her grandparents' house, it's dark, and we're about to get into her mom's car with her to leave. Immediately, we take out the photos. Compared to how many were on the wall, we grabbed very few. We start with the two she grabbed. They're all normal and fine. The first one is of a family with females with hair from the obvious 80s and men with those glasses that are just a little too ugly sitting on the couch, smiling. Cute, a family photo. The next photo is one of those girls with the 80s do in a portrait photo. We move on to the photos I grabbed. Most are dusty and couldn't be salvaged. Some were unable to make out, whatever. We get down to the last three. It's one of a few of the girls and one boy, all looking solemnly to the camera. Okay, a little odd, but it's the mid-80s. Everyone's a little odd and looking like they're gonna eat your soul. The next is of some of the girls passed out with red Solo cups on that same couch. The last is of a person barely visible, staring straight at the camera. It shudders me to this day. I can't even describe it. I haven't seen the photo in so long I have no clue what it looks like, but I remember it being so horrifying that it shook me and my best friend to our cores. Neither of us know where those photos went. Her mom said she found a couple of the photos, but those were the dirty and impossible to see ones. No one can find the one that haunts me. Even though I can't remember the details of it, I'm shaken just thinking about it, and yet I don't even remember what was on it. TL, DR, creepy shack photos, and one that is entrained into my soul, even though I physically cannot remember what it looks like. There's an old office building which got kinda popular nearby where I live. For me, the creepiest or scariest moment must be when I found a little room full of candles, cellophane paper, cigarettes, needles, spoons, etc. It made me kinda knew I shouldn't be there. Luckily, I was with my boyfriend, so we bolted out of the place, but we weren't alone in the building. As we were heading for the stairs, I see to my right a bunch of people in a room just sitting, chilling, I guess, thinking afterwards that was probably what they were doing. But after what kind of room we just saw, we just ran off the stairs and out of the building. We kinda got followed with screams and yells, but thank God nobody got actually near.